Okay, so um, welcome Schools Forum members and colleagues to this West meeting of the West Northamptonshire Schools Forum on the 2nd of July 2024. My name is James Edmonds. I'm the Democratic Services Assistant Manager at West Northamptonshire Council, which provides the governance support for the Schools Forum. I'm opening the meeting as the first substantive item on the agenda is to appoint the chair of the Schools Forum for the year ahead. Before we get to that point, I will advise you of apologies for absence and forum membership changes. We have no apologies for absence for today's meeting. Forum membership changes. Peter French has resigned as the Church of England diocesan representative owing to retirement from his substantive role and has been replaced by Canon Andrew Reid. Bev Churchman has been appointed as a maintained nursery representative, and Ginny Bootman has been appointed as an academy mainstream representative. So those are the membership changes to report to you. Do forum members have any declarations of interest relating to the business of today's meeting that they wish to make? Okay, I am seeing no indications. In which case, if we move on to item 3 on the agenda, which is the election of the Schools Forum Chair for 24-25, and if I could invite forum members to make any nominations to that position that they wish to raise, please.
I'd like to nominate Paul.
Okay, and
second.
who was the seconder? Sorry.
I was the seconder, John Lake.
Thank you very much. And
sorry, Paul.
It's all right, thank you.
Are there any other nominations that members wish to raise? I see none, in which case is the forum happy to approve the appointment of Paul Wheeler as the chair for 24-25. If you could indicate.
Yep.
Okay, that seems to be unanimous. So yes, if I could invite Paul to take the chair for the remainder of the meeting.
Thank you, James, and thank you, everyone. The next item we've got on the agenda is the election of vice chair. Now, Peter obviously had stepped in, but with his resignation, and anyway, it comes up for renewal. Is anyone interested in being vice chair for the next year? No?
No, but if you don't get anybody, I'll happily step up. But I'm sure other people are more desperate.
No, I don't think so. Eliza, I think you are the only person there. Now I'm happy to propose you, Eliza, if we can have a seconder. Yeah, thanks. Thank you. Thanks very much, Andrew. So, and a vote, is everyone voting in favour of Eliza as vice chair? Put your hands up. That's great. Thumbs up. Super. Thank you very much. Okay, James, you got that?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Well, if we go to the minutes of the last meeting held in on the 14th of February, You've had an opportunity to look through the minutes. Has anyone got any comments or questions in relation to the accuracy of the minutes at all? I've gone through them, and I think they look like a fair reflection of the discussions, and there was some very good debate at the last meeting. But is everyone happy for those to be approved? Are there any questions? If not, we will approve. Yeah. Okay. I think that's okay then, James. So if we move on to item 6 on the agenda, the provisional outturn and the carry forwards. Emily?
Apologies, I'm having issues with my camera, so hopefully everybody can hear me okay.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, so the paper outlines the DSG provisional outturn for 23-24 and the DSG cumulative balances position, and then goes on to outline the position on maintained school balances for the year ending the 31st of March 2024. So table 1 within the report shows an overall variance of a £4.1 million overspend across all 4 blocks. But within this, you'll see that there is a significant overspend of £6 million on the high needs block, which is mitigated by underspends across the other 3 blocks, most notably the early years block, which is underspent by just over £900,000, which is made up of approximately £400,000 underspend, £400,000 underspend on 3 and 4-year-old funding, and £100,000 underspend on 2-year-old funding. Both of these are due to fewer hours claimed according to the January census hours than what was budgeted for. The schools block underspend is primarily made up of the ring fence dedelegations, which will roll forwards into the 24-25 financial year. So the overspend in the high needs block is mainly attributable to the expenditure on the provision of pupils with EHCPs in mainstream and special schools and in units, and also on support for those without EHCPs as well. The remainder is mainly due to demand and cost for independent provision above budgeted levels, but also to note that we are seeing emerging pressures in alternative provision as well. Moving through the paper, then the impact of the in-year overspend on the DSG balances results in a movement of a surplus of from a surplus of 1.8 million to a deficit of just under £1 million after we account for the in-year movements. So obviously, given that the cumulative position on the DSG is now a deficit, we're currently working on refining a deficit recovery plan for sharing with the DFE in September, which will then be shared with Schools Forum in the autumn. So that concludes the section on the DSG outturn and balances. So I'll move on to the maintained school balances at the end of 23-24. So the individual school balances at the end of the year total approximately 8 million, and of this, nearly 2/3 is uncommitted revenue, with the remaining third mainly committed revenue, with just under £1 million capital balances, and the breakdown of all of this is shown in the appendix to the report. So Schools Forum a while ago decided on the criteria upon which schools could retain the balances, and the current agreement is that we can claw back any balances in excess of 10%. So there are 4 schools at the end of the year with balances in excess of 10%, ranging from a value of 1,000 to 21,000, and in percentage terms, 10.2% to 11.9% of their 23-24 budgets. We currently don't actually have a clawback mechanism, though. So with the endorsement of Forum for this financial year, we're proposing no clawback of those balances in excess of 10%. And then as part of the schools funding consultation for 25-26, we're proposing including options for doing so in relation to balances at the end of the 24-25 financial year. So moving on then, there were 9 schools with deficits at the end of the year, totaling 436,000, an increase from 6 schools and an increase from a total of 93,000 in the prior year. It should be noted though that 2 schools make up around 54% of that total deficit, with 1 submitting a plan to balance across the medium term. The remaining schools' deficits range from of 12,000 up to 54,000, and from 1.7% to 6% of their 23-24 budget. So we're currently working with these schools to look at reducing their deficit over their 3-year plan and across the medium term. So that pretty much concludes the key points within the paper. So I'll open it up to any questions.
Right, has anyone got any questions on that to start with first? Any members? Andrew.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you for the paper. I've got Chair, are we just going for the can I just ask questions on the early years component just initially with and the high needs block, is that right?
Yeah.
Emily, just wanted some clarification if you may. It just seems to me that obviously we're familiar as a national issue, as also a local issue of the overspend with in relation to high needs, which is very regrettable, but the need is genuine and there and increasing, as we know. We seem to be fortunate at one level that that's being offset to some degree in terms of the overall balance by the early years situation. Is the plan to make those appointments? I appreciate this is the schools forum, not a children and young people committee type question, but I'm just interested in whether we're going to be making those early years appointments, because it seems to me that the offset for high needs could be also at the expense of effectiveness of provision for early years, and that's what I'm just trying to unpick.
Yeah, so I think that the recruitment activity was ramping up towards the end of last financial year for early years. So a lot of the underspend last financial year was accumulated from the previous months. So sort of the attempts to recruit are ongoing. We have obviously got the rollouts of the settlements this year as well, for which we didn't take a top slice for the central expenditure for that. So obviously we've only got the 5% retained funding for the 3 and 4-year-old funding. So the plan is basically to recruit up to the level that we've top sliced and retained for the early years expenditure for the 24-25 financial year, obviously to meet the existing central expenditure requirements and obviously to support the rollout of the new entitlements as well.
Okay, thank you. So if we were to sustain the current level next year, it would actually increase because those appointments would have probably been made.
That's correct, yeah. So in theory, there wouldn't be so much of an underspend mitigating some of the in-year overspend.
Thank you.
Emily, if I can ask a follow-up on that one. We noted that when we approved the 5% to be retained to cover these costs, that any underspend we would look at in the early years block, because it looked like there was going to be an underspend, how that could be either redistributed or used to offset the increase from 4 to 5% in the top slice for 4-year-olds. So have we looked at, or are we looking at a mechanism to either redistribute this saving back into the providers who are really struggling at the moment, or offset it against the 5% top slice that we've taken, so that at least that mitigated there? What actions are in place for that?
So I believe that the early years service are looking into that. I haven't got the details to hand now. I don't know if Ben wants to step in on that. Obviously, that we have moved into a deficit is a bit more challenging as the DFE look at our balances across the 4 blocks rather than individually between each individual block. Obviously how the funding's given out to us. So obviously it is a bit more challenging, but I believe there is some work to look at doing that, sort of following on from the previous agreements for the retained balance from actually COVID sort of era.
Emily, Chair, if it's okay to come in then. Emily, you're absolutely right. I think first thing, and I'm pretty certain this is where the sort of the conversation and the concerns were going. Early years should be funding early years. What we're doing in this paper is just showing all of the different blocks, and we have to show the cumulative balance. We're certainly not going to use early years funding to offset overspends in high needs. And I don't think that's what anyone was implying at all. But the big challenge for us in early years is twofold. One has been, we started last year without a team. There was nobody. So we've created a team. We've got some really great people in that are making a huge difference already. The recruitment was challenging. We made the decision that in a couple of recruitment rounds not to appoint because we didn't have the right caliber of people, so it's caused delays. But that was, in my opinion, that's still the right decision. We've then obviously got the rollout of the new entitlements. That has been the main focus of that team for this year, getting enough providers ready to provide those new places and ensure that enough people are aware of the new places and the new entitlements. If there is any money left in the early years block, my view is that it should all go out to the sector. We've done that before. That's where we should be again. Very happy to bring that at the end of the year, Paul. I think that's the right thing to do. That's what that funding should be for. That's for our preschool age pupils. So that's what we'll do.
That's lovely. If we minute that would be superb, because you're right. They are, and particularly those providers are really struggling. That and SEND are the two absolute focal points at the moment. So that's very reassuring. Thanks, Ben. Has anyone got any other questions, either for Emily or for Ben at all?
Yeah, can I come in with sorry, if there are questions, I'll stop, but just one other comment.
Oh, just a quick one. Dan, I think you've got your hand up.
Sorry, Ben, please continue. I'll ask a question afterwards. Not a problem.
Thanks, Dan. It was actually going back to the high needs element of that paper, which is obviously the biggest pressure for us. We are certainly not predicting that high needs block is likely to come down quickly based on the current demand that we're seeing coming through, and the complexity of demand and the complete lack of provision there is, I say locally, I say regionally at the moment, if not nationally. So through work with groups of other councils, including the F40 group, which I know we've talked about at this meeting before. So the 40 councils with the lowest levels of funding around education. A lot of those councils are forecasting that it was going to take more than a decade to bring their overspend back into the black. Sorry, we are that far out from being able to meet need and balance the books. We're talking at 10 years or so, and that's councils without the similar pressures that we have. So I just wanted to put that down. I am not expecting the high needs element of the DSG to be balancing anytime rapidly soon. There are lots of things we'll talk about later on that will hopefully make a difference, but there's no magic wand on this at the moment, I'm afraid.
Okay. Yes, we discussed that before too. Sorry, Dan, would you like to?
Yeah, sorry, just to pick up on Ben's point, actually, I think there's obviously an understanding locally, nationally, the pressures, particularly against the high needs block. And actually there's an acceptance of the position we find ourselves in, because the money's being directed to ultimately the children that need it. And I think, although we understand that must be an enormous pressure for West Northants, there is you can understand it. If I can just draw everyone's attention to point 3.2 and 3.3. So really, just I said, following on the point that I've just mentioned, is that we can understand why there is that underspend in the high needs block. But then if we just go on to point 3.3, and it's one that's been mentioned previously at the Schools Forum, is around it says the large majority of the remaining high needs block overspend is mainly due to the increasing demand and cost for independent placements. And we know WNC has really focused on increasing provision within authority. And I know that we've talked about this probably for the last 12 to 18 months around the number of young people in independent placement. And then also the quality of that placement. I know, Ben, you talked passionately previously around the challenge around the quality assurance of that and value added in terms of what that looks like. At the moment, it feels as though both are going up. One, we understand what's happening in terms of the challenge around independent provision, the quality of provision, firstly, and then ultimately being able to bring children back into authority provision.
Yeah. Okay, I'm very happy to come back to that. That's all right.
Yes, thank you.
So bringing children back in, by September 25, we will have created 600 new specialist places. Obviously, a big chunk of those are at Tiffield in the brand new school, but we will have created 600 new places. The idea of a lot of those is to meet need that is currently being met within schools where schools are holding on to children. And we know that's the case at a number of schools at the moment. But we have specifically designed some of those units, especially Tiffield, with a view of there will be children coming back from out-of-county residential places and out-of-county specialist places. That's a massive part of the drive for us. That is mainly because we want children to be in their communities where they can access provision with everybody else. But that is also from a financial point of view as well. We know that children in one of our schools, we will not be charged the same level of funding as we would to children going out. Meeting needs first, finance second, and we will always be that way. And I think we'll be unapologetic about that as well. So I think that's one of the drives. The other big drive there, and Dan, I know you and lots of other colleagues have been involved in this. What we need to do is bring consistency and a consistency of quality across 186 schools and 500 odd early years providers and lots of other providers in West Northants. So we are using the ranges properly. We are identifying, assessing needs as early as possible. So we are not letting needs escalate, and we are not letting ourselves get to a position where we are having to look out of county. So they're those two bits. The last bit, which was the first bit of your question, actually, Dan, the quality assurance. I'll do a bit of an update around some of the recruitment in the council in one of the agenda items later on. But we are recruiting 2 people to have a specific focus on quality assuring and managing not just our out-of-county send provision, but all of those commissioned provisions that we have. We have had a team of 1 people for the last 2 years. That will go up to a team of 3, which is quite a big increase on a percentage level. And we're very confident. We're getting some really good interest. We've had 1 very successful recruitment round already, and those people will be starting in September.
Thank you, Ben. Fiona?
Thank you. I just wanted to make a quick note on behalf of families that actually, although it is our desire to obviously bring our budgets down by having our own provision and bringing children back into our own county, if children are thriving in the schools that they're in at the moment, we cannot insist that families bring them back in because we do have a parental choice, don't we, for school placements. And if children are happy and learning and doing well in the schools they're in, I don't think we will be looking to move them. Obviously, we would suggest we have other schools, but we couldn't force parents to do that. So until that has run through, there will always be some children out of county.
Thank you. Thank you, Fiona. Eliza?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a little bit about the Tiffield school, because obviously my school is down the road and my other schools are surrounding it. There hasn't been a lot of publicity around it within the local area. I'm now in the process of speaking to Year 5 parents with children with the HCPs, and they are asking me about what alternative specialist provision is available in the area. Can you let me know what information and what the level of need will look like at the Tiffield School. What's it for in terms of that? I don't think we know enough about it yet, so I can inform my parents.
And I'm very happy to do that. We're working with Greenwood Dale, who are the trust that will be running it, to develop that prospectus and that communication out to local schools and parents as well. It needs to come from them because it's their school, but we're obviously working very closely with them. I've been chasing them because I want to be able to share that now. I will come back to it, and then I'll share that for all members of this group, but I'll share that with wider heads as well. And they obviously want to get out and about as well. One of the concerns that we have, and I'm sure you'll all see it coming, is we advertise it, and before we even know, we've got 500 people waiting at the door. So we need to be crystal clear about how we will allocate those places into that school as well. But Liza, I'll come back to you, and I'll come back to all members with more detail about exactly what it's going to look like and exactly how we will start allocating places. It's not going to be 250 children on day one. That's the only way to open. If we open big bang like that, it will not work at all. But I'll come back to you with that level of detail, okay?
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Ben. Is there any more questions from anyone? Dan?
Sorry, Paul. I don't know if Ben mentioned that. Is there a potential proposed opening date for the Tiffield New School? Sorry, if I didn't hear that.
September 25. So we're only a year away.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. Is there any more questions for Ben or Emily?
Right. Could I ask a question, please, Chair, about the school deficits?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you again for the information pertaining to this. I'm a bit confused as to why we've got an arrangement for reclaiming, but we don't have a mechanism for doing it. But perhaps we'll just park that one for the moment. The 9 schools with a deficit profile. Just interested. Do we have a educational performance profile on their schools, and is there any correlation? I'm just interested whether those what context we've got for if there's any pattern with those 9 schools or academies.
We do have that information at the moment. What Emily's presented is these are the schools that are over that 10%.
Yeah.
I think there will always be some schools that will keep some funding back for a project. That's fine. If it's planned, I think that's absolutely appropriate. And if it's 20p over or a couple of pounds over, then I'm not overly worried.
Yeah.
Where I do have worries is where schools aren't using the budgets they've got that's allocated to the pupils that are there that year, and there are no plans at all, and it's just not being used. For me, that's not good enough.
No.
You're right. We wanted to flag it here through the consultation next year that we will be proposing a process for schools that cannot justify the additional the surplus. Then we will spread that back out across schools. We can do that review of performance as well for schools forum, where that's not where we are at the moment. We're purely presenting this as financial. We will take that analysis obviously behind the scenes as well.
Okay. Thanks, Ben. You answered actually a question I was going to ask, but I was focusing initially, pardon me, it's the way I put it, on those that have got a deficit budget.
Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry, I was going to ask about the other 2 schools as well, so thank you for that. But it's the deficit budget schools, because it's easy for us to be critical, isn't it, and worry about that, but at one level, but at another level, it's what are we talking about 9 schools whose educational performance is also at risk? I think that there's not a direct correlation between overspent and performance. No. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any more questions on this agenda item before we move on to Beth? Agenda item 7. Okay, right. Beth, would you like to take us through?
Sorry, Chair. Just formally, so the last agenda item asks the schools forum to note the positions on provisional outturn and school balances, and also invites the forum to endorse the decision not to claw back uncommitted school balances exceeding 10% as at the end of the 23-24 financial year. So the forum is happy to
Yeah, is everyone happy with that? Yeah. I think so. Anyone against? No. Abstain? No, I think you're all right with that. Thanks, James. Beth.
Thank you. This is a sort of administration report that we bring to you every year. Local authorities are required to provide our schools with the arrangements for central government grants that we pay out on an annual basis. So we're asking schools forum members to give us a view on these arrangements and, where appropriate, inform the governing bodies that you represent of the grants. And this paper, you could point them to it on the website. The majority of grants that are provided by government to us are for maintained schools, with ESFA paying the academies directly for the same grants. Our overarching policy, our aim, is to pay schools the grants in the month following receipt of the payment. We usually receive the payment on the last day of each month, and then the following month's transfers towards the end of the month is when we aim to pay it out. Where allocations are provided to us by government, they go straight out, but where it's a locally held budget, for example, lack funding for pupil premium that's held by the virtual school, they tend to go out on a different time frame. So that one, for example, is termly. So there's a table which provides information. The main DSG grant, we pay that out at 12% in April and then 8% each month following for our maintained schools. Excuse me. And we have a table there that shows the other grants that we're expecting in 24-25. We're in a period of time where the number of individual grants seems to be expanding still. A lot of the grants to do with salary inflation are rolled into the base funding the following year, but then they issue a new salary inflation type grant for the new year, and they refer to the old one as historic. And it can become quite confusing if you don't pick up on that difference between historic teachers' pay and pension grant and the current one. There's also sort of additional funding, supplementary funding. So that's all listed there to try and make it clear who's getting what. The schools where it hasn't been rolled in and it's still the historic is still a separate grant are the special schools and AP. So hopefully that appendix to this report makes that easier to understand. And that's all really. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Beth. I found that a very concise and helpful report. Are there any questions from forum members for Beth? No? Okay. Then if everyone's happy to receive that report, then thank you very much, Beth.
Thank you.
And we'll move on to agenda item 8, which is the schools funding consultation timelines. Emily.
If we've lost Emily, I can take this. Should we give her a moment?
Emily said she had to drop out for another meeting.
Oh, she's gone to the end.
Do that. Thank you, Beth.
Thanks.
Yeah, I haven't got the paper up in front of me, but the timelines follow the regular annual pattern. So we're waiting for the announcement of the provisional national funding formula, NFF, which usually comes out towards the end of July. We'll then start working on what that means, doing our modelling on current year's figures to see what the impact would be of any changes we have to make following that NFF. Bring that to you in the October Schools Forum meeting, and that with a draft of the consultation we'll take to schools. That will then give you a chance to input into those questions, ask for anything different if you want that consultation to be amended. We then take that out to schools to consult for a month in November and bring it back to the early December Schools Forum meeting. So that we'll be asking you for decisions in that December meeting ahead of us having the settlement, which usually comes out around about 18th to 20th of December, just before we break up. So if there aren't any huge surprises in that December Schools Forum, that will then be we'll apply your principles from the December meeting, do the modelling and submit the budgets in January, middle of January. We have to send it into government. They do their checks, come back to us to approve it, and we can finalise and publish at the end of February.
Okay, before I open up for any more questions, I've got one. I think it was we covered it off, but the from the last time minute, I know we were concerned about the lateness of information in terms of early years and trying to see if that can come in so we can do the early years consultation alongside the mainstream. Is that correct?
That's right, yeah. And so I'll talk about the next agenda item as well at the same time, because they're kind of dovetailed together now. So yeah, so to try and respond to that issue that we had last year, where normally we get the early years information at the end of July as well. It was a bit later than normal from government, but even still, what we would like to do, even if it was as late as it was for 24-25 budget setting, we'd like to go back to a position where we set in principle the percentage of uplift that we would pass on for the rates. So we would conduct our modelling, work out as much that the percentage that we're able to pass on to break even, to passport all of our funding out, because in most cases the census for which we're funded on gives us less hours than we have to pay out. So there's always got to be that adjustment to make sure we don't go over budget. We aim not to be under budget. So we aim to do that modelling and then bring to the same schools forum that you've set the schools budgets in October, with a broad principle of we'll passport on this much funding, and we'll be able to say that's what it would look like for the provisional figures we've been given. Go out to consultation in November, the same timeline as for schools. Come back to you in December. So they're going to be pretty hefty schools forum meetings, big agendas, October and December. Get those decisions in principle ahead of the settlement coming out later. If there are any surprises in what we're given, then it might mean we have to call an extraordinary meeting for January, or possibly it means we'll be as late as we've been this year. It'll be February again if there are some major changes between the provisional and the final settlement. It's unusual. It would be very unusual if that does happen. But it would mean if there aren't any major changes or major surprises, we'd aim to be able to get out the actual rates that are set in stone either very early before Christmas or just after, rather than having to wait until the February meeting, which I think would be a lot more helpful for settings.
Well, yes, and particularly our maintain colleagues that are trying to finalise their budgets ahead. Is there anything else, Beth, you'd like to highlight on those two agenda items, 8 and 9?
No, not really. Until we get the provisional, we don't really have a lot to say about it.
Okay, so has anyone got any questions across agenda item 8 and 9 for Beth? I think those meetings are going to be very interesting in December when we see. And Lee, you have. Thank you, Lee.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a plea for me, and it's old news, but if we can get on it early this year and make sure, in terms of sort of communications, how some of these consultations, etc., head out to all the parties, including sort of academy and academy groups. I think engagement with might mean that you get more consultation responses, which can only be a good thing.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll work with Ben to see what the best ways of including everybody are.
I think that's a really important point, Chair.
Yeah. Yes, thank you, Andrew. Yes. Yeah, yes, it's making sure it goes out not just to the individual schools, but also to the trusts, and with follow-up and encouragement. We did better, I think, last time round, but it's historically we've had quite a low level of participation and response. Has anyone got any other comments or questions? Okay, Thank you very much, Beth, for those updates. So I'll come on to, we've noted those. I'll come on to item 10, the high needs project update. Andy.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. This is quite complex, so I'm just going to outline what's in scope of the paper and what's out of scope. So we're not going to discuss anything to do with further education. We'll be bringing the proposals to those busy agenda meetings in October and December. We don't today talk about the early years targeted SEND funding or SENIF funding because that was reviewed in February, and we're great to confirm that those increased payments are already taking place as from April. But what we are looking at in the paper is EHCP funding, early years, mainstream schools and units, plus the non-statutory funding, the targeted SEND funding for school age. Just wanted to outline that because there is quite a lot of information in the paper. The paper itself is based on the format which was used by the early years lead in February, which we're taking as best practice at this moment in time in bringing the consultation documents results through to forum. Well, there's one additional section, which is section 10 at the end of the paper, because this is not the end of the story. As I said, we will continue with further education a little bit later in the year. From a consultation perspective, I'd like to cover the consultation first, if I may. At the February forum, we brought forward recommendations, and we then said that in order to comply with our statutory duties to reach out to affected stakeholder groups, we then needed to do a further consultation. So that was to reach out to parents and carers of children and young people we send, young people themselves we send, and also education providers. And the reason for doing that is there are recommended funding changes. There is a recognition that we are bringing this paper to forum later than originally planned. We were due to bring it forward in May, but the area inspection and then the knock-on effect of the area inspection, which has meant that we are then a little bit later in the year than we originally planned. But I wanted to highlight that this second consultation is taking forward and working on the results of the one which took place in September. So the September was about the principles, and then now we are looking at more detail. And one or two more clarification points before I ask forum members to look at one or two of the questions, is that we've included again all responses. When I presented in October and December, I highlighted that around about 50% of the responses, people don't reach the submit button. Well, we're taking the same principle that if someone completed it but didn't make hit submit, we've included those responses. We have also used the same principle of including in the detail the feedback from respondents who expressed a preference. So if someone said, didn't answer a question or clicked on the neither agree nor disagree, we've discarded those. We've just looked specifically at the respondents who have made a preference. And final point is that we promoted both of these consultations via the same channels. And the positive news for forum is that via these channels and via the support from forum members and others who have been sharing the fact that there is a consultation out there, we actually reached 40% more education providers. Sorry, we'd not reached, we had responses from 40% more education providers than we did with the first consultation. And based on the previous point 8 and point 9, perhaps Ben, myself, Beth, maybe I can highlight to you what we did to reach that group to secure more respondents. Having said all of that, that detail, we landed on a number which was exactly the same number of respondents for education providers and also for parent carers and young people we send, and also young people that send themselves. So everybody within this counts as one, and it is just a coincidence that it's exactly the same number. If I walk forum members through the questions at very high level, the first question was around the expansion of the education banding tool. This has been called many different things. It's commonly known as the RAS system, and it's been used in special schools in Northamptonshire County Council and then West Northampton in 2017. And the first question I'm referring to 8.2.7 was with regards to the support for expanding this into mainstream schools, SEND units, and early years providers. And within the table, as can be seen, when we put agree and strongly agree together, which is the format we've used throughout and with the previous consultation, 72% were in agreement that we look to implement the tool within those sectors. If I move to the next question, which is 8.2.8, this referred to the funding levels which were included in the separate document, and these are the funding levels which were brought to forum in February. Again, it was the bigger number was the strongly agree and disagree with the implementation for EHCPs with those funding levels. Question 3, which is 8.2.9, was something which is on the contentious side, and we talked about this in detail at the previous forum, was that there could be a number of education providers who, as a result of implementation, lost funding. And then I'll come on to payment protection in a few moments' time. And as can be seen from the results, there was 67% of those who strongly agreed or agreed, acknowledged the fact that funding could actually go down, and that was the approach from the Western Northants Council. Question 4 then was around the non-statutory targeted SEND funding, which and I do highlight non-statutory. And Ben, did you want to come in on this point, or should I continue for now?
Andy, you carry on if that's all right, because you're in the flow of this. I'll come in later on if that's okay.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Thank you. And yeah, from the targeted SEND funding perspective, the numbers which were presented to forum, and I do need to highlight to forum, there were 2 small changes which were not in the paper brought to forum, and these were highlighted to us by our 2 seconded SENCOs, that there could be a very, very small number of young people who don't meet the criteria for the plan, for an EHC plan, but are in a mainstream environment and could meet the criteria of SEND range 6 or 7. So only a handful of young people we consider, but it's important. Maybe they're in a mainstream school because of parental choice. We don't know. But what we've done is we've also included SEND ranges 6 and 7. So that's I just wanted to highlight to the forum. It is an asterisk in the paper that was not. That's in addition to what we talked about at the previous meeting. But again, the strongly agree and agree methodology, which we've used before, highlights that 59% were in that positive direction. And then on the quantitative questions, the final question with regards to mandatory implementation of the SEND ranges. And again, that was a positive response at 77% when we look at agree and strongly agree. And in addition, as we did at the previous consultation, we included a question around qualitative feedback, which gave any respondents the opportunity to add some comments to the question about, is there anything else that you would like to add? What we did was follow the same format where we collated these questions into a number of topics. The vast majority were related to EHC plans, EHCPs. A number were around targeted SEND funding, a number around generic SEND funding, the majority of which were there isn't enough money in the overall budgets. I won't take forum through the individual breakdown. I wanted to, within the paper, just highlight the range of questions that we had. Am I okay, Chair, to continue with the paper rather than take questions now? Or do you want?
Yeah, go on. You carry on for now, and then we'll come back to the questions. Thanks.
Okay. There were 3 issues which were raised in the minutes from the previous paper. The first topic was around payment protection and support for schools who were partway through a financial year, and that was that became an even bigger issue with the area inspection, the knock-on with the timing. And so in recognition of this impact and further analysis that we have done, I've made a further recommendation within the paper that for the September 2024 to March 2025 period, so the balance of this financial year, that we provide any school which will receive more funding. That happens on schedule on the 1st of September, but also that we implement 100% payment protection at a total school level for any school which was potentially losing money, and that is instead of the 75% that was originally planned. So that was one key point which we would like to recommend to the forum members. In order to facilitate this, it means bringing forward some of the support, but we still look at this moment in time at the 50% support for year 2, which will be starting in April 2025, and then 25% starts in April 2026. A second question with regards to, could we look to expand support for Type to SEND funding for school age to SEND range 3? At this stage, West Northamptonshire Council cannot support this from a financial perspective. When the financial modelling was started in August last year and completed in September, at that time we looked to extrapolate the trends that we'd had of applications. In the same way as EHCP applications have continued to rise exponentially, we have found that the applications for Type to SEND funding have increased even further than we anticipated, and we did build in an increase into the modelling, and we cannot at this moment in time look to support beyond the budget that's allocated. Within the paper, there was an additional 300,000, just over 300,000 pounds, and we anticipate that the inclusion of SEND range 6 and 7, and then the run rate at this moment in time for the balance of this year, we can't look at including SEND range 3. What we will do from September is, when the new application form is available, that will include the SEND range and the excuse me, the SEND range. Apologies. And this topic could get reviewed in the future, but at this moment in time, we cannot look to support this for the balance of this year. And then finally, the third point, which was in the minutes, was with regards to the support for a potential third year for Type to SEND funding. We believe that this will be a very, very small number of young people, and that this would already be covered by the exception, which was included in the original paper. So any which are exceptions could be considered. That was the feedback on the consultation, and then the response to the 3 points from previous meeting. And I think Ben wanted to say, sorry, Chair, that was me providing my update.
Okay, Ben, you want to add something in there?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a couple of bit that Andy's taken us through there. What is such an incredibly complex sort of year or so of work, and Andy's been very heavily involved. So but the first thing I wanted to say is just thank you to all those colleagues from different schools, from our parent forum, from across the council that have been involved. Most authorities, I know this having worked in a few others, also know this having spoken to the guys that have helping us do this work, who are external. When any authorities do this piece of work, trying to look at consistency around RAS funding or whatever the banding funding is called, but a maximum would be about 25% of cases they'd look at, and then they'd extrapolate that out, which is fine. I get that. There's a methodology behind that. We've done 100%. We've done every single one. And there's reasons behind that, and that's part. And the reason I'm flagging that is A, because I think it shows the robustness and the detail of what we've done. But the big reason behind that for me was that because we were in a situation where we had over 350 different ways of agreeing funding in West Northants, I still can't get over that figure. The variations were so great. We wanted to make sure that we looked at everybody. We wanted to look at every child, at every level of funding and every school. So we are really confident that what's come out is really accurate and really informed by the data of where we've come from. So that was the first bit. I just wanted the robustness there. And as I said, there's been a lot of people involved, and I'm really grateful for what everybody has done there. There's no easy way to bring consistency in, because bringing consistency and a clarity around funding levels means that some people will always drop below a line. So I think what Andy's just explained around, we have listened. It is mid-year. Yes, it has been delayed. And if possible, Chair, I would like to just touch on some of the Ofsted. I can't talk about it at the moment, but some of our response to that, if there's the right opportunity today. Because of the delay, I think the 100% protection in year is the absolutely right thing to do. I think that is absolutely the right thing to do. We're listening. It would be unfair of us to try and implement that. And I do think that 150 and then 25 is a generous way of us doing it. It's the best we can do. I think that there's 2 or 3 other sort of absolutely key bits for me. All of this funding is on top of that targeted send funding, which doesn't exist in most places. It just doesn't exist. We are protecting that. And you've heard from Emily already, and you've heard from myself briefly and from Fiona and others. Our high needs block is going to be 10 million plus overspent very comfortably, if not more, and it's going to keep going up. Nobody in this council, from the chief exec to the 151 officer, our finance officer, nobody has the authority to overspend by a penny. But what we're saying through all of this is we're going to put about 2.8 million extra into our local schools because we believe in our local schools. And that links into some of Dan's questions earlier about bringing children back in and reducing that spend. We think over time, this will not only do the right thing for children, but it will help us balance the books for DSG. So there's 2.8 million in. We are saying we are happy to invest more money that we don't have. We don't have it. It's adding to the overspend. And on top of that, there is about £2 million worth of investment that the council has found and will put in to create additional capacity within the council, because we know that particularly around SEND, but also around alternative provision and inclusion and children at risk of exclusion, we know we've got to do more. So the council has found, in a time where we don't have any money, council's found just under £2 million to recruit extra colleagues in our educational psychology team, our EHCP teams, and lots of other areas as well, including commissioners, as I mentioned earlier. So this is part of a massive investment coming into the education system in West Northants, which I think is really positive. None of us can see the benefits of it yet. I'm very confident that we will all see the benefits of it. And the very last bit for me, and we've touched on this quite a few times in here, is around communication. So we know, well, we will be creating a new communication lead as part of that additional funding, because we know we've got to improve the way we communicate with individual schools, but with the whole sector and with parents. We are crystal clear here. Any changes to this, any school that whose funding will be allocated, this doesn't mean that all that kids' provision is going to be taken out at all. And I am fearful, and I have heard feedback from parents and from other sort of groups, that there is a fear out there that by bringing in the RAS funding, this will mean that children's provision is going to be cut. That is not going to happen. That is not the message at all. And I think that's a really important, and I know Kim is on the line today and sort of registered to speak as well on behalf of the parent forum locally as well. But it's just a couple of those key messages I wanted to get across. I think this is one part of what is a good package to try and address what is an almost impossible situation at the moment. So hopefully the overall, that is what people will see. As I said, it's always going to be challenging.
Thank you, Ben. I'm going to ask forum members if you'd like to put your hand up and to ask questions of Ben or Andy at the present.
You have Eliza Hollis, Chair.
Thank you. Thanks, Eliza. Oh, you're on mute, Eliza.
Sorry, I'd just like to say from a head's point of view, and I know it's not the same for all colleagues, but the current children who have got EHCPs, who have gone through the RAS funding, as a head, it's good to know exactly what funding we're getting. And actually, for some of our children, that has increased, which has been great. And I know others have had the negative. But I now can plan going forward in a much tighter way, knowing what that EHCP, that child's plan, what funding comes attached with it. It's not a, you know, am I going to get this? Do I need this? I actually know what it is. And it's been a long time coming. And I know we're going through a period of instability, and it's going to be positive and negative for some, but we needed this. And I think we have to give it a chance. So from my point of view, I think it's a really positive move, and I've seen the benefits. And my my business manager is very clear about what's coming in for these children. The next bit is what we're getting in targeted funding for those children. That's the next steps, but we'll cross that bridge. It's a process we have to go through.
Thanks, Eliza.
I think from my point of view, it's nice to see that the comments were all considered and taken on board where they can be from the previous debate that we had, and I think that's really important and welcome. I think the investment in targeted SEND funding is good. I think, and the fact that will be kept under review, particularly around the SEND range 3. And I guess the action that we've had to take around SEND range 3 identifies that it's effectively, that's as far as the budget would stretch, and we just simply couldn't do any more with it. And I guess also recognition that may well affect some of those children in that range with targeted funding where they haven't got an EHCP. But that I was welcome the comments that will be kept under review, and we'll see how we get on during the course of this year. And I will ask for other questions coming back as well. But I think it's going to be really important, Ben, that we get regular updates on this as we have done, but it will remain a standing agenda item. With specific focus on how different cohorts and different needs have been met, or where we see that they're not, and provide that feedback so that we can develop the scheme as it's live for areas where it's needed.
Chair, is it okay to respond?
Yeah,
I think it's absolutely critical. This is a standing agenda item. What I would say, and I think Emily and Beth both alluded to it earlier, because of the nature of our overspend, whether that be on high needs or whether that be overall, we will start to tip into formal DSG recovery plans. And there's, there are big programs out there in safety valve and delivering better value. We don't want to get into that territory, but we are going to have to start having that very formal response to the DfE about why our DSG is overspending and what our plans are to reduce it. What we will need to show through this board is that we are challenging, and we're challenging each other, and we're challenging any decisions that come forward. And where we choose to invest, we believe it's the right thing to do, but also where we choose to save money or reduce funding, that we know we're doing it in the fairest and most equitable way. That's what we're going to have to come up with. And as I mentioned earlier, the recruitment in the council, we will be bringing in colleagues to specifically work around education, finance, and trying to support all of us, individual schools, and all of us as a schools forum, to bring that DSG back into balance and to really bring that back under control. So we will be recruiting those staff to help us do that. And I like to say, I really appreciate Eliza's comments, and I think, I don't know if Kim is still with us. I couldn't see her on my screen a minute ago, but I know Kim from our parent forum, I know had asked and had registered sort of formally to come and speak today around, I think it was around this item. So I don't know if I lost Kim for a minute, but that's because I'm not used to Zoom anymore. I've just got far too used to Teams.
Yeah,
Kim is on the screen, Ben.
There. Okay.
I am here.
Kim, would you like to speak?
Yeah, more than happy to. As a PCF, we're happy to see that they're suggesting that they're going to do the 100% protection up until April. We were quite concerned that schools had already set their budgets and we're going to have them cut after plans have been made for money already. Our only caveat, and I'm really sorry if this throws a curveball for anyone because I've only had the conversations this morning with a group of parents. Our only caveat would be that we would like to see a really rigorous appeals process to ensure that schools do have a way to redress if there are any EHCs that aren't correctly banded from what they say. Parents are slightly concerned because they are obviously aware that not all the EHCs are particularly well quality assured. So they're sort of saying, well, they're looking at the whole budget, but if my child happens to be that child that is now currently 4,000 underfunded, when the year 11s leave and it's their funding that's up, that then brings my child's down, where does my child stand? So we'd just like a little bit more information from our point of view. I don't know if you guys will be the same, as to how a school addresses if a particular student seems particularly underfunded. Who do they go to? What's the appeals process? Can that be rectified before April, before the funding comes down?
Andy, you got your hand up anyway. Would you like to answer that?
Yeah, I would, because that was the point I missed in my notes, Chair, and I do apologise. As from last week, we actually brought forward the appeals process. We spoke to a number of schools and via our project group, and for schools which have a child who's part of their current cohort who will continue to be part of the cohort from September, we actually brought forward the start of the appeals process, which we believe is a robust appeals process, because it's the same appeals process that's been used in 2017 in special schools. We've just amended the administration, and we shared that appeals process with the Senko networking meeting last week, which was, I think it's 70 or 80 schools were represented. And following this particular meeting today, as part of what Ben said, the need to communicate, we need to wrap that appeals process into the communication that heads out to schools, but not just schools. Reassure parents, as Kim said, that we have that appeals process in place. I will also add that there will be appeals process for schools who are receiving young people with plans from September. We look for them to, and again, it's the same as for the special schools. We look for them to have them as part of their cohort for half an academic term. So around the end of October, they can then complete the appeals process. And if it is then that the result is that the officer who reviews this actually says, no, I think that this is correct already, this RAS band, there's a second part of this where it would go through to funding panel. So we have a two-step, we believe we have a two-step robust process, which is similar to what's currently being used for special schools. I hope that answers the question.
Kim?
Sorry, I think my question was maybe a little bit too open. The part of the appeals process that we'd like more detail on is more about, rather than the actual funding and the reevaluation of the funding, if that EHC is not quality assured and is not written accurately, quantified and specified, are we suddenly going to have a demand for new educational psychology assessments to reassess that child to be able to amend the EHC to get the accurate funding? I'm just conscious that in a big picture, you're then putting the demand on an already tough survey. It's the bigger picture of the appeals that we're concerned about, rather than the actual, is the banding correct on the correct paperwork? Actually, is the paperwork correct?
Andy or Ben, would you like to?
Yeah, Kim, there is already an appeal process. There is something we need to look at. I think you make a really, really important point. We know there are too many ACPs out there that are not accurate and that don't actually depict a child's needs exactly as it is at the moment. we need to go through that annual review process. That has to be improved. That you're right, that will bring a significant challenge. If we are then looking at going back and getting EP assessments for everybody, we know we've got that backlog, which we are hitting hard at the moment and reducing. Kim, very happy to talk to you, and we'll talk about this next week through our Send Improvement Board. It is next week, isn't it? I had some worry it was this week as well. So no, you're right. We're very aware of this as the challenge. We've got to do, working alongside this, there's a big piece of work to improve the quality and the accuracy of the EHCPs, which is why we're bringing in all those additional staff in that EHCP team to do that.
Thank you, Ben. Andrew, you got a hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Ben, and others who have, and Andy. You're right, it's very complicated, multifactorial, and we very much welcome the child-centric approach that you have taken, and also parent and family-centric approach that you've taken. And I would reinforce Eliza's comment, sorry, about the massive importance of knowing where you stand when setting budgets. So therefore, with all of that, I'm still concerned, and it must be said, mustn't it, in terms of the elephant in the room, Ben, which you to some extent have mentioned, is this risk management in concerning with the bringing the DSG back into line. Because what we are looking at here is a very detailed attempt, and I agree. I think it's had every likelihood of having a positive impact in an area, however, whereby the DSG alignment controls are external to us. And I think it would be an unusual conversation if we weren't asking the question, how are we to manage that DSG alignment, which after all isn't unreasonable given the quantum involved? Because of course, an external alignment of the lines of a safety valve funding caveats that come with all of that might have a very dramatic effect on all of this work that you've just been proposing. And I say that having sitting also on, or until recently, on Cambridgeshire Schools Forum, where a safety valve has come into that local authority. So I've seen at first hand, and it's no criticism of our colleagues in Cambridgeshire, but I've seen at first hand the raft of understandable requirements that come with, and constraints which come with, a enforced realignment on the DSG.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point, and the Cambridgeshire situation I know is particularly challenging. I know I worked with a DCS over there for a long time. What we've tried to do, the reason I made the big point around us doing 100% and knowing that this is robust, is that when we have to, and it will be very soon. Emily said September. I'm hoping it's more October, November. We will have to meet with the DfE and start to spell out why we're in the position we're in and what we're doing about it. What we believe through this investment, by bringing the clarity and the consistency of the way that we fund, by linking all of that targeted send funding to ranges and making sure there's consistency of that, and having colleagues who will go out and support schools to drive that consistency, we believe that there is a huge way forward we can make to improve the identification and assessment of children in school early. And we believe, and the evidence that we have from within West Northampton nationally, that says we get there early, we intervene as early as possible, we get children with the right provision, then we don't need those out of county places, we don't need the residentials, we don't have the 500 place waiting list for our special schools that we have at the moment, because we actually get it right from day one. And we give children the best support so they can stay in their setting. And we've had this discussion briefly at this forum before. I'm very I know there are lots of new members with us today, but just to do some of the background, what we know is within West Northants, we have the highest requests for EHCPs when children are in year 6. That's wrong. That should not be that way at all. It should be much lower down. And what we know is, because our primary schools do a great job and our secondary schools do a great job too, but what we then have is a huge panic of, I'm going from this tiny little lovely cotton wool primary school into a great big school, and there's big smelly teenagers and it's scary and they're not going to get the same level of support. The only way to get something that we want now is to apply for an EHCP. And we see lots of tribunals for children in year 6 that push us to name out of county, residential, or etc. independent. Now, I believe by bringing in consistency for everybody, so everyone knows what they're getting, what it's expected, by bringing in the support and the challenge, we can get that right and we can reduce a lot of that demand. That starts to bring down, I'm sure colleagues, we have young people that we spend over £250,000 on at the moment, their education. Yeah, every other child or most children in our mainstream schools, we probably spend £5,000 or £6,000 a year on. We only need to bring back a few kids from somewhere in a very specialist to start making a massive difference. And there are some high numbers. That takes time. And I know Fiona said before, absolutely right. We are not forcing and dragging children and their parents back. We want to make it clear that West Northampton's education provision is brilliant and you don't have to go outside, you can stay here. That's what we're really trying to do. But I think just last point, Andrew, what I fully expect is, so this SEND funding will be a standing agenda item. I think we will have the DSG recovery as a standing agenda item probably from September onwards in this group. That's what I expect us to have.
Can I make a suggestion, Chair, based on
Yes.
that? And that is, I wish to sound patronising, Ben, because that was really, that I think it's powerfully put. I just wonder then, in the context of the paperwork and the comms, that we don't underplay or understate the strategy that is being adopted, because I didn't feel it quite came out well, didn't quite come out in its full strength in the paper, even though the paper is very detailed and very strong in other areas, of putting in place the firm foundations in process that then enables a proper and fair approach to, you know, efficiency savings, but I know that in the right possible way is brought forward. And I think that as an argument, particularly on 100%, actually, I agree, is something that perhaps I think we could make more strongly as a forum in the context of what this is enabling us to do.
Andrew,
It's
really
not
helpful.
kicking the can down the street. What it is doing is putting in place a firmer footing in order to make the improvements and changes that are going to be needed, including bringing DSG into line.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Andrew. Dan, you've got like to comment.
Cheers, thank you very much. Firstly, I just want to acknowledge the significant amount of work that's taken place, and also the complexities of the situation that we find ourselves in terms of funding. So please, you know, I don't want that to be forgotten in any way, shape or form. Just for clarity, there's no vote on this. So this ultimately is going ahead as of September. Is that right in my understanding? Just referring to point 10.1 and 10.2. So
I think you're right, James.
I accept. I could be completely wrong. I'm just asking the question.
No, that's my understanding too, unless James is saying differently.
Do you want me to step in, James? Oh, you found it.
No, go ahead, Beth. Yeah, my understanding is that this isn't something that's subject to a decision by Schools Forum, but if finance colleagues could link that more clearly than I to the Schools Forum powers and responsibilities, I think that would be helpful.
That's right. We'd like a vote for your input on the changes. So it's for information vote rather than a deciding vote by Schools Forum members.
Okay, Schools Forum is being asked to give a view, not to decide.
Okay, so there's no decision making effectively is what I'm trying to ascertain. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And if I might just so I'll really I don't want to just paraphrase Ben somewhat, but although I appreciate my views can often feel oppositional, they're not. They're just very child-centered, and I think that's really where the position I come from. And I just want to really highlight that. We said that some schools will obviously this will impact negatively. Do you have an idea or an indication of how many schools that would be? And then, sorry, the follow-up of that is then potentially the consequences of that, because if presumably if they're in, it impacts them significantly, it may affect their ability to be able to offer provision within those unit provisions within that mainstream school and so on, and therefore we find ourselves in a very tricky spot. So yeah, it's how many and then what's the impact, I guess.
Can I answer, Chair?
Yes, please. Yeah, please.
Yeah, we at the previous meeting we did highlight that on the when we completed the modelling, I think it was at 64%. It was at 64, 65%. We anticipated 40 schools would lose some funding. That, when we moved to 100% modelling, as Ben referred to, has moved to 53 schools. That is a range from a £60 loss to many tens of thousands. And the schools which have had the many tens of thousands, we're already talking to them. Within this, I want to add the caveat myself that that is based on the cohort at the moment in time, which was at the end of March. And we are working with schools at this moment in time, and we highlighted this twice through the Senko networking meeting, to ensure we've got the right data. So we're working through to say, have we got the right children in the right schools? Have we got the right children in the right parts of the schools? So whether they're in the unit or whether they're in the within the mainstream part of the school. And also through this RASBand appeal process, based on the current cohort, do we actually have the correct RASBand level? So the answer at this moment in time is 53 schools. The impact, we will not be able to judge fully for all of these schools until we've completed that process. We're working through that at this moment in time. And we will then be looking at a further review for all schools towards the end of September, once they've completed once we have the new cohorts in place, to ensure that that information is correct. And the objective of that is to ensure that for April 2025, just get my years right, that we're correct. Talking to other councils, this does take a number of months. It does take a number of appeals. It does take a number of amendments. So in answer to Dan's question, I can't give a definitive answer today. All I can do is define the process and the process steps that we're going through to ensure that this is 100% as accurate as we can make it for April 2025. And it's another reason why the move to the 100% payment protection at total school level is appropriate, and we brought to the table today.
I suppose the additional challenge to that, Andy, is that, you know, I understand process driven, but the deficit could be greater given the variables that you've talked about. It could be positive, it could be negative based on everything that you've talked about. And I think we look within this paper at agenda item 7.3 around risk. And I think for me, that's really what I'm trying to do here, is just to draw forums attention to potential risk, because if schools are in a significant deficit, they may not be able to meet the needs of those young people within provision, and therefore, as a consequence, apply more pressure to what is already a very difficult situation. So I think nothing more than that point. The other thing is just around the appeals process. I know that I mentioned briefly, it wasn't necessarily included in the previous minutes, around I've seen the appeals process. Andy, thank you for sharing that. There's no independent representation on that. I just wanted to explore that a little bit further. So my understanding at the moment, at stage one, it's reviewed by the EHE caseworker, who potentially may have been involved in writing that, or certainly within that same department. And then we have an appeals process, but without independence. And I know I mentioned that previously. Was that not deemed to be appropriate?
Chair, can I respond?
Yes, please do. Yeah.
Ben, are you okay if I take this question? The second part of the two-step appeals process includes the funding panel. The funding panel is chaired by the Assistant Director of Commissioning, and I forget the rest of the job title. So it doesn't like that. Yeah, partnerships. So I do apologise, but there are many job titles within West Northampton Council. I do know that the funding panel are looking at their membership. Yeah. And if we take this point away, Chair, maybe I'm not an expert on where they are with regards to the membership of the funding panel, but I want to assure forum members it's not just based on the education team. It's broader with West Northampton Council. And so if we could maybe take that as a minute and we can come back at a future meeting.
Yes, Yeah, I think that'd be great, Ben. Is there anything else you want to add in there as well?
Yeah, so Tony Challoner is the person that chairs that. Tony works in our public health department. He doesn't work in education at all. He's very, very experienced of operating funding panels, including sort of central civil service and across all sorts of education and public health services. So very confident. Had to definitely be away from myself and my staff because I think that's right. The challenge, I mean, Tony and I have talked about it. What we would really love to do is have head teachers or Senkos in that as part of that panel. So they are helping us bring that equity and that challenge to that group. We're very conscious of the amount of time we request of head teachers and Senkos to come out of school. But that is certainly the intention. Dan, I absolutely get your challenge to do this really robustly, really openly. That should be a panel that is made up of partners across the piece. That's where we will get to. We'll put the mechanism in to get that right. I know Tony's on that one.
Thank you.
We'll obviously include our parent forum as well as they sit at everything we sit as that external sort of support and challenge to us.
Yeah, I think that would be great. Thank you very much, Ben. I think, if we come back to really what we're talking about is that fair and more consistent, timely and transparent, to use that strategy terms, I think that really kind of supports that, doesn't it? That notion around what we're trying to achieve. And I know I talked about my last one because I appreciate everybody's time. So please forgive me. I will just want to talk about Little Billy again. If everybody forum remembers my example about Little Billy in our previous meeting. So Little Billy, just to recap, is Little Billy has additional needs beyond the notional send. Targeted, he would be your typical targeted send type young person, but wouldn't necessarily then convert to an EHCP and meeting that threshold. And obviously my concerns that I raised previously is that although I understand the pressures on budgets and money isn't infinite, what happens to Billy after those 2 years? I know we talked about the extension of year 3. I know, Ben, you'll talk to me about specialist teachers coming in and supporting early intervention and those types of things. So I think really for me the question is around what's been considered for Little Billy, I guess is the question.
Sorry, before you answer that, can I ask as well, with that 2-year cutoff, when that starts from? So if someone's already had some targeted funding, a child has, as at now for 2 years, is it a cliff edge or does the clock start from now? If you could kind of answer that one to either Andy or Ben.
Can I answer the second part, Ben? Is that okay? For a child, young person that currently has targeted send funding, that will continue for the duration of the application. The majority are 12 months, some are shorter, some are actually extended to up to 18 months, dependent on where it falls within the academic year, although they are not aligned with an academic year. From September, what we're trying to do is bring in this, and we are using the word robust many times today, this more robust system which links the application form with a send range, which brings it together. So so if a school currently has a young person who already has funding, they are invited to complete a new funding application from September. So the 2 years, it could be a child is 18 months support, it could be that it's 6 months support, but from September, we would then start for a school which completes the targeted send funding application form, which is much more robustly linked to the send ranges. That would then be the start, Paul. Sorry, Chair.
Yeah, thanks.
Ben, do you want to take the first part?
So, Dan, you're absolutely right. A lot of the response from me will be around ranges, and it will be around bringing in that additional expertise about how we best work with the Little Billies of this world. As we said, we know that range 3 is a really difficult one. We also know we're going to be challenged on all of this work by the DFE as they come in and start observing everything that we do. I think bringing that consistency, bringing that quality, except there will be 5 new specialist teachers that we will deploy across West Northants to work with, not to work to. to work with all Senkos, with all heads, with all leaders in schools, to really share what best practice is, to share different ideas, different strategies to meet needs. It's that really difficult balance of where do we draw a line, and what we cannot do is just keep adding more and more in. So they're very, very challenging conversations we've had. And 12 months ago, one of the options we had, and we had to genuinely consider it, was we're just going to cut all of this. We're going to cut it all to just bring DSG back in line. And that's what we're going to do. And within that mix, we get rid of all of our targeted SEND funding as well. Most people don't do it anymore. There's no way that I was going to push that as a genuine option at all. And I know from Councillor Baker and from other leaders within the council, that's absolutely the wrong thing to do. But it's trying to find that balance of where we can and where we can't push. Andy's already said we will keep that under very close review. And if it's not working, and if it really isn't working and the evidence is clear there, then we will be flexible, and we will obviously respond to that in an affordable way. If such a thing does exist, I'm sure it must.
Thank you. And sorry, I said it was my last question. This is more directly at Beth. Beth, can I just ask the question around the funding for sorry, the phone is ringing in the background. Targeted funding. One of the conditions or points named on there was around whole school notional SEND funding. And I know, Beth, you and I have obviously asked around, well, firstly, in terms of, can the authority request that, or does the school have to necessarily? No, I sought legal advice that we don't. But can you just clarify the point on that from the authority's position? So when submitting an application for targeted funding, there was a notion that the school would have to submit an example or provision map of some description that demonstrates how they've spent whole school notional SEND funding.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that links to the policy that we set for the first time for the 24-25 budget back in October and December. So in order for us to be able to assess whether the notional SEND funding so all of the element 2s add up to more than your notional SEND funding, then we'll need to see evidence of that. So whether that's through a business case that you submit to us to show us what your staffing for SEND is, and that's what most people are doing right now when they're applying for that. They send us in a costing breakdown of what they're spending on their staffing for SEND pupils above the kind of classroom teachers that would be there normally. And if that comes to more than your notional SEND funding, then we can consider refunding the element 2s above that notional SEND funding.
So sorry, again, I'm a simple person. So what we're saying is, in order for the authority to consider a targeted funding application, all schools have to submit evidence of their whole school notional SEND.
It's completely unlinked to the targeted SEND funding.
Okay,
it's the third stream of funding. So you have EHCP funding under RAS.
Yeah.
You have targeted SEND funding linked to the ranges.
Yeah.
And then so that's looking at top up. So both of those things are looking at element 3. For element 2, which if your notional SEND in your formula funding budget is breached, you're going above that with your element 2s for cover that our SEND officers believe is reasonable, then we can refund your spend on element 2 above your notional SEND budget. So 3 different streams of funding. Okay.
So the question remains, does the school have to submit any evidence for that?
Yeah, we can't give out funding without due diligence. We have to see what the staffing are, who the children are. Is that appropriate for the level of need of those children? You can come to us in advance of spending that money on those children to get assurance that you will be refunded. Come to us in advance so that we can assess that spend is, will be refunded.
Sorry, I completely appreciate this is probably me. So if anyone wants to jump in and explain it in simple terms, I'm just asking if we're making a targeted funding application for a young person, we are able to demonstrate we've spent their individual notional SEND of £6,000. We don't have to submit whole school. We're just doing it on an individual basis. If we're asking for anything wider, then we have to look at whole school notional SEND.
That's right. Yes.
Okay. Right. So on an individual basis, on a singular application, there is no need to submit whole school notional SEND unless we're going.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. Sorry, Beth. I apologise.
I get you. No, sorry, it's me. It's taken me a while. The penny stocks.
Sorry. Thank you.
Thomas, you've got your hand up. Can I? Would you like to ask a question?
Yes, I did. Daniel raised something which made me think of something I'd not considered before. So my question, maybe it's not for this particular discussion, as I know we have our own FE funding group that we meet. If a young person's transitioning from one setting to another and targeted SEND funding is maybe short bursts or limited, and there may be a cut-off, if a college is applying for targeted SEND funding, will the fact that that young person had targeted SEND funding in a previous setting be taken into account? So that was the first thing I was thinking about. And then the second thing that I wanted to feed in was around the SEND ranges, because we had our first training session as a FE sector last week, which went really, really well, and it was received really well. And we are starting to understand that the consistency of language across the county is really important with this, and our staff are going to find it very useful. The challenge we face, and I think it may link into this discussion that schools are mentioning around notional SEND, which we don't have, is when we look at the guidance and the ranges and it looks at the post-16 sector, it refers you back to the school setting. And then when you look in the provision for the school setting for the ranges, it doesn't marry. So when you look at range two, that provision in the college would be high needs. So I think there needs to be maybe a specific working group around FE, because what I want to help to try to avoid is a problem further down the line, because I know that we're further down the line, but I really don't want us to get there and it go terribly wrong, and then we're all having another discussion on this forum about it. So that's the stuff that I just wanted to feed in today, if that's okay.
Thomas, thank you for volunteering for being part of that group. You're absolutely right, we need it.
So Ben, you're between you and Andy, you'll
yeah.
that together.
Yeah. And as Andy said earlier, that view into early years and then FE, we know we've got to get there, that we will definitely go on that. And Thomas, I think they're really good reflections. Absolutely get those. We'll take those into that one of those groups, definitely.
Chair, if I could respond to the first part of what Thomas talked about. We do have this provision for the transition funding within targeted SEND funding, to make sure that as this young person does move, if they're currently moving from early years until, from say an early year setting into a reception class, we don't leave them behind, if you like. So we just need to work through the details, Thomas, for a young person who's leaving a mainstream school and moving into a college environment. So we've not talked about it within our project team, because we've not got that far down the line yet. We're still working through the details in the younger age groups, if that makes sense. I just wanted to answer the part, Chair.
I think as well, just in terms of, I feel like a broken record, but it's about volumes. So if we've got volumes of 60 odd targeted SEND funding, if we've got a separate process for transition funding, and we've got the HCP processes, I just think with the volumes we've got, it really just needs to be thought about carefully, because that's going to cause a significant pressure on teachers and practitioners to do our assessments.
Yeah. Ginny.
Hi, can I just pick up, Andy, about the transition of children from preschool settings to school settings, and the fact that there is transitional funding? I'm not really au fait with that. So where would I find that information, please?
If I'm completely honest, we're still working through the details. And what we said was that we will publish the details via the local offer from the 1st of September. So because this is today's discussion is largely about the future, we still have to finalize the exact details. And then we don't hide it. We need to ensure that we communicate to all appropriate stakeholders. So the details of that will be available via I forget the correct title, SEND Support Services Manager, which is Anne Wakeling. To name an appropriate officer and the current appropriate role. But we are working to ensure that the documentation and this information is available for the 1st of September. And what we want to do is continue to co-produce that information alongside our partners within the different, WMVP and the sector to ensure it's in the right language, and ensure that then there's a mechanism in place that it is reviewed 3-6 months down the line to ensure we got it right. This project does not end when we all log off in a few moments' time. Oh, sorry, when the meeting's finished.
So because the situation I'm in, because I'm a Senko of 4 primary schools, is that I've got a couple of children coming from preschool settings who've got targeted funding that I'm led to believe finishes prior to them beginning in my setting in September. They've also got RSAs going through for EHCPs. And so I'm sure you'll agree with me, we seem to have a gap there that won't be bridged for this cohort of children who need that support. So if anyone can tell me if I'm missing something there, I'd really appreciate it.
Could I ask that you, because I think that sounds like a specific example, reach out to me directly?
Yeah.
And I'll ensure that then heads to the correct person, because I know that not everyone's on the call. There were too many people, but and him at westnorthants.gov.uk. Use me as a signpost, and I'll share that.
I think, and the other thing, the final thing is the primary to secondary transition. I would love for us to have better links between primary and secondary Senkos, because we have this year 6 thing going on. And I'm trying to link very much with my secondary schools, because I think historically there is a gap between primary and secondary. So I'd be very happy to be part of anything to do with that, to bridge that gap.
Thanks, Ginny. I'll take you up on that offer, definitely.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Okay, Eliza, have you got a question? Mute again.
Sorry, that is definitely not just your issue, I think, with regards to children in preschool now coming into reception. We're meeting with nurseries and they're saying the same, that they're getting targeted support there that runs out, and then we have to then start the process. So any information you've got around that, Andy, I think would be really useful for all children that are transitioning.
Can I respond, Chair?
Yes, if you can, please, Andy. Just while you're there, Kim's just popped a comment in as well in the chat. Will this not affect all children transitioning to primary in September 24? So if you can answer that.
If I can comment on the Eliza first, the point with this is it's transparency. We're still working through the details, and it's not just about, as I say, Ginny's young children. We need to make sure that one of the gaps we've found is that we have the process in place, we have appeals process in place, but very few people know about them. So what we said at the very first meeting with this project, when I came to presented to this forum meeting, is we'll use local offer as our primary channel, but support it with then what is available in other parts of West Northampton. So there's a whole piece of work which will take place over the number of months once we get through this, because today is very much a starting point, even though we've been working on it for a number of years. And I didn't check what was in the chat, so if I could.
Yeah, so will this not affect all children transitioning to primary in September 24?
If I can, my response would be, Chair, that I don't have the details today. I need to take that to the appropriate person. If it can be perhaps minuted, I will then ensure that it's not forgotten, and I'll take it to the appropriate group. I represent many different stakeholders within the council this afternoon. And I cannot be an expert. It's too complicated for one person to be an expert, but these comments are not forgotten.
No, that'll be fine. And I'm sure James and Catherine will minute those and make sure that we've come back to them. Okay, that's been a very a very useful debate. And thank you, Kim, and everyone for your input to that. I think that's also provided a lot of clarity and also helped us and will help Andy and Ben refine the processes or make sure that there aren't any gaps, so that as we move into the next academic year, this will be a smoother transition as we can possibly make. As with any main change, it's not always risk-free, and I'm sure there will be things that come out during the autumn term that we haven't thought of. So if everyone's happy with the paper that we've received, and we're happy to receive that paper, then I will move on, and thank you, Kim, as well for your contributions to the discussion around high needs, to the forward plan.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the standing item, which essentially at this point sets out the items coming to subsequent forum meetings for the year ahead. It does reflect the points that were raised under items 8 and 9 about the schools funding and early years proposals work now coming to according to the same timetable as that previously applied only to the schools funding item. Clearly, as the year progresses, if the need arises to deal with additional items, that can be fed in and considered by schools forum as necessary. So the potential for a standing item on a deficit plan was mentioned earlier in the meeting. Yeah, it's intended to set out the kind of the basic framework of what the schools forum does, and certainly what it needs to do. It can be updated as necessary as the year progresses.
Okay, if there's any questions on the forward plan? No? Super. Well, item 14, urgent business. I haven't been advised of any other urgent business, and none's been raised. So it just remains for me to thank everyone very much for all the work you've done this academic year on Schools Forum in helping the officers, the council, and myself navigate our way through what is always a very tricky funding year, and is clearly not getting any better at the moment. So we'll see what the next government brings. But thank you for giving up your time. Thank you very much indeed for all the contributions. And Dan, as you said, you know, the questions you ask, Dan, and every forum member are very insightful and help officers and help the council plan how they support the schools. So I'd like to wish everyone a very happy holiday when it comes, and a good break, and we will see you in the autumn term in October at our next meeting. And with that,
thanks, Paul.